Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, coming at you live to talk about episode 13 of season 2 of ClassicaLoid. And this was a really interesting off the wall episode. It was kind of approaching a recap, but it was breaking the fourth wall thoroughly. The characters are self aware that they are part of an anime, a show and everything like that. And it had me cracking up from the get go. It really reminded me, actually, of a similar thing they did in the anime series Recreators. They had a recap episode sort of late in the game, mid series, maybe a little later than that. And it was really creatively done, where it was pseudo hosted by one of the main cast of characters, Meteora, in that series. And like she's addressing the audience, catching everyone up with what's going on in the show, and offering up these like alternate takes and alternate versions of events and character designs. And so this one, I love the fact that they have this big red versus white musique competition thing, and so they are essentially using footage, hailing back. It surprised me that they were going so far back as the first season already. With Sosuke straight out of the gate, his horrible song, which every time I hear it, it gets me grinning and laughing. Especially the sort of the hook to the song, the bridge or whatever it is, I can't pronounce it, but that, it sounds just so hilarious and depressive, but in a funny way. And the way they over embellish everyone's reactions, like everyone's vomiting and sick and depressed, and it's the worst thing they've ever heard ever. And it's just absolutely hilarious for that. And respectively, you got, musiques from all of the ClassicaLoids that, they would show footage stemming back to when you first heard that in the series. In the case of, Bada and Tchekhov, they primarily played their songs from season 1. We really haven't gotten much in the way of songs from them. I think one in season 2 thus far, which was after the monumentous being taken under the wing of the producer, Wagner, as he insinuated himself into the ARC facility and company. And so I love that is something that's actually addressed. I think it's actually Wakun himself who's like, oh, leave it to you two to call back on, season 1 songs, things like that. And what I really loved is, whenever they would have one of these music pieces playing, across the bottom of the screen you have, all of the sort of informational stuff, what this new version of the song is, what it hails from, who orchestrated this version, who's doing vocals on it, what it is based on, what classical piece it's based on. And they did this respectively for each one of them, and interspersed in between those flashback sequences of hearing the music, they had everybody, like... Team Red didn't have that many members. They had Liz, they had Tchekhov and Bada, and that was it. And then, like, Schubert later on decides he's gonna reggae it up and join Team Red and everything because of the red setting sun. It reminds him of the reggae and all this kind of stuff. And like, it was off the wall and hilarious and absurd. I love that it's all orchestrated by Kanai's father Kyogo, and he even says by the end, well, here's another episode of ClassicaLoid where it's just absurdity from beginning to end. They are self-aware. The producers are having a blast putting this series together and telling an off-the-wall tale, while also, using so much inspiration, taking so much out of the real historical lives of these composers and their musical prowess, their creativity and the drama that unfolded in their lives. And they are being inspired and using those things in the formulations of the characterizations of these ClassicaLoids. And, we've had great opportunities. I love the fact that we finally had an episode in this season dedicated to Liz. I'd love to see even more based around her, because we get so much more focus on probably what would arguably be referred to as the more well-known, composers, Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, things like that. And but yeah, I thoroughly was engaged with this episode. I enjoyed it. It was as I say, absurd and off the wall. And but I like the creative tact that they had, where they're all self-aware. They're putting on a show, and this is just a bridge between, it's the end of the year. They knew it was New Year's approaching, and we're just going out with a bang that has nothing to do with the plot and the story and everything like that. And but just hold your breath, because we'll be back very shortly and continue the saga, continue the story. But this was a reprieve where everyone, it was all about the music and everything like that, and being informational about that kind of stuff, and being fun and lively and engaging in doing so. And so yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And honestly, I didn't think I'd have this much to say about it. It took me, over 12 hours to finally get around to actually watching it, because my whole day was busy, and I had a very bad problem with one of my teeth, where, it had chipped, and I had to get it out of my mouth. And by the time I was done with that, it was around the time the episode had finally gone live, and I was not up for watching it and reviewing it. I was in pain, and I wanted to, sleep. So I slept for several hours after the busyness of the hours before that. And so this is a very late review, a very late discussion video. And I had actually made notes to talk about my favorite Beethoven piece, one of my favorite pieces of his, in lieu of really having much to talk about the episode. And I for those of you who have been following my, ClassicaLoid coverage, you've probably heard me tout this before. But my favorite of his, orchestrated pieces is the Piano Sonata Number 8, or Pathétique, the first movement of that. And I have always, ever since the first time I ever heard of it, or rather heard it, I was already a fan of Beethoven's works. And of course I knew of Moonlight Sonata and things of that sort, his more well-known pieces. And so the first time I ever encountered this Pathétique, first movement, it opened my eyes wide. It opened the gamut wide to my interpretation on classical music. It is solely responsible for my wanting to seek out more classical music from all different composers, Mozart, Chopin, Liszt, all this kind of stuff. ClassicaLoid as a series itself has fueled that as well, that much more so. Not only about the music, the orchestrations and the compositions, but also about the lives of the composers themselves. I want to learn that much more about them. But Pathétique, Piano Sonata Number 8, is the first movement is singular in its being a classical piece of music that opened my eyes and made me appreciate that it's not all Beethoven. Like at that point, I was only singularly very familiar with Beethoven, and even then 2 or 3 of his pieces. And when I heard that piece, it was like an emotional roller coaster. The entire first movement of that piece, it feels emotionally like an encapsulation of living a lifetime, ups and downs, give and sway. This the bass tones of the drama, and the light and feathery tones of joy, and it has a little bit of everything. It has an emotional equivalent on everything: sadness, happiness, joy, rage, frustration, all this kind of stuff, just in this one composition. And it was one of those things that, as I say, when I first encountered it, it was like on a sampler CD of classical music. And it was even one of these weird ones you buy at like a Target store, where they had like a little thing, a kiosk you'd walk up to and you'd play, and they'd play snippets of songs. And for some reason, this CD had like nature sounds that would play alongside the classical pieces of music, the subdued pieces of music and things like that. And so the first version I ever heard of Piano Sonata Number 8, Pathétique, was forest sounds coinciding with the actual, playing of the piano or whatever it was. And so for a very long time, I was desperate to find a version of it that was comparable, but without all of the nature sounds in the background. And that was hilarious in and of itself. And, you know, like I say, out of that, and there's a part in the finale episode of the TV series MASH, where one of the characters who is very appreciative of classical music, the character's name escapes me off the top of my head, but there is this point where he is playing classical music in the finale, and because it's during the Korean conflict and everything, some soldiers, or who are presumed to be soldiers, it turns out they are a small band, a small troupe, who play music and things like that. And one thing leads to another, where once they've been taken into sort of custody and they're being held to be processed, they end up getting killed. And this character, Winchester is the character's name, Charles Winchester III, I believe, from MASH. You know, he loves classical music, and he was trying to teach them this classical piece. And I think it was a piece by Chopin. Don't quote me. But, you know, that was another turning point in my life for an appreciation for classical music, because you saw the passion the character had. He was even trying to teach this small band this music, and they eventually get killed, as I say. And he suddenly draws into question his passion for this particular piece that he's been trying to play them, you know, that kind of thing. And it was another turning point where I was like, this is classical music. This is something I really like. I really enjoy it, you know. And especially in this day and age, there's so many different kinds of music and everything like that. And I am somebody who always has been fascinated by history and the past. And classical music is the sheer embodiment of that. So I hear a piece like the one that was played in that MASH finale, and it moves me. You know, I hear a piece like Piano Sonata No. 8, Pathétique by Beethoven, and it moves me. And these are responsible for opening my eyes to a grander appreciation of the musical history, you know, that kind of thing. And so, as I said a little while ago in this video, I had all of that ready to talk about because I didn't think I'd have much to really talk about what is essentially a recap episode. So hopefully I've given you guys a little more food for thought, a little bit more of an insight into my own mind as far as classical music is concerned, and what really was the debut of that sensibility to me, you know, mentally, to want to approach it and seek more out about it and learn more about, as I say, ClassicaLoid, the anime itself. It has expounded upon that idea. It's exploited that notion and made it that much more so something I'm eager to learn more about, the lives of these composers. Not only learn more and become more affiliated with and associated with the pieces that they have composed, but I want to learn more about them as people. And at least one person who always comments on a majority of these videos always leaves me such fantastic insights into the histories of these composers to add to the great discussion that I'm left wanting to have after each and every episode. So that really answers to that, and I appreciate that so much. You know who you are out there. But yeah, a long rambly video that's probably about 3 times as long as I thought going into it I'd have to say anything about this episode and classical music in general. But yeah, it was an enjoyable episode. It was a fun episode. Didn't really amount to much in the grand scheme of things, but, you know, we'll be getting back to the plot in the next episode, I hope. And otherwise, that'll be it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well. Happy New Year to you, if I don't see you before then, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.